Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 3.10 of the Living to Thrive with Cancer podcast. I am excited to share with you that I am offering a new free online masterclass. This class is focused on cancer survivorship and how you can move through my 5-step path to go from survivor to thriver. I created this process because I started thinking about what I didn't know when I was in the early years of my diagnosis. And maybe you are in the same place, knowing you want more for yourself and you've heard me use this term thriver, but how do you get there when you're living in the daily life of just trying to get by, just getting up every day and keeping on the moving forward? So I sat with this and knew that I needed to put it on paper. I needed to put on paper what I had learned and these benchmarks of progress so that women like you can see where you are and where you can move in a step-by-step path to move from survivor to thriver. And this is the thing about the Thrive Her process, as I call it, is that it is about you and where you are. It's not a quick get it done. It's a process of easeful movement as you are ready and able. Because we all know that each person's cancer story is different, and so the process towards being a thriver will be different too. Registration is open for this class. It is happening on Thursday, April the 11th at 12 p.m. Eastern. I'll put a link in the show notes and you can save your seat. It's also at the top of my website, www.catherinewhite.coach, and you can again find it in the show notes. Come and give this a listen. There's going to be a replay for those of you who sign up and have to miss because you have appointments or life just happens. And I just want to make sure that you get to be able to have access to this 5-step path that I've created to help you move from survivor to thriver. All right. In today's episode, I'm focusing on the fact that March is Colon Cancer Awareness Month. As a stage 4 colon cancer thriver, I have made it my mission to share my story and to educate others about this not so talked about cancer. I hope you will come to understand more about colon cancer and why now is the time to take control of your health and be proactive. If you are living with colon cancer, I would love to hear from you. Talking about colons isn't sexy or glamorous, but it is necessary. This isn't an old person's disease anymore. Colon cancer patients are getting younger and younger all the time. Now is the time to get educated and to learn the underlying lifestyle choices that could make a difference between health and disease. Now, if you tuned into episode 3.8, you would have heard me interviewing my husband and my caregiver, John. His story runs parallel to mine, so you might want to go back and listen to that. And it's just as important to know because cancer doesn't just impact the patient, it impacts the whole family. But today, this is my story. We're going to take a look at how I was diagnosed, my beliefs around survivorship, the information you need to know about colorectal cancer and prevention. All right, we have a lot to cover, so let's get started. My name is Catherine White, and I am a stage 4 colon cancer thriver. I use the term thriver because over the last 9 years, I've really worked hard to create a life and a mindset that is not just about surviving. It's about living a full and happy life in spite of a cancer diagnosis. I choose to get up every day believing that I am happy and healthy and that right now is the time for me to be living my best life. Getting to this place was not a quick and easy process, but I have and will for the rest of my life do the work to care for myself, body, mind, and spirit. To live in the mindset of a happy and healthy person and not as a cancer patient or a victim. A client recently asked me why I always say that my diagnosis was stage 4. Why does it matter when I'm telling people when I'm living with cancer? Because oftentimes, maybe even most of the time, people think that stage 4 means death, that it's an end sentence, that it's terminal. I really believe that it's important for people to know whether the cancer is colon or another type, and whether the cancer is stage 1 or stage 4, that there is always possibility and room for belief that cancer isn't a death sentence. The word cancer strikes fear in a person's heart, but I want you to know that in that fear is an opportunity to learn so much about yourself and to make small changes that can make a big difference. I would say, in my case, cancer actually became a life sentence in that it was the opportunity that I was given to create a new and different, better version of my life. Even when I wasn't really sure initially what that outcome would be, I still decided that I was going to create my best life in that moment. And that's what carried me through and still does to this day. Every day is me living my best life. So I share that I was diagnosed stage 4 because I want you to be able to believe that there is a way to redesign how you are living with the intention of creating your best life in this moment and into your future. You don't have to be the image that is portrayed in movies of the stereotypical cancer patient. You can be joyful and vibrant and strong physically and mentally, even when you are afraid and sad and your body really needs a lot of support. When I was 22 years old, my father was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. He was given 6 months to live, and at the end of the 6 months, he died. 20 years later, in 2015, I had just turned 43 when I was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. I was so afraid that I would be my dad, that my husband and children would go through what my mother, my brother, and I went through when my dad got sick and died. But my story is not my dad's. My story actually starts with my dad's. Looking back, I have become so aware of the fact that no one gave me any counsel or recommendations for how to stay healthy and hopefully cancer-free. It was like it was just this event that happened, and I was set free at 22 to live my life without any education, and essentially I felt like it was like a roll of the dice. Now, I don't know about other 22-year-olds, but I was not educated at all about cancer, how people got it, or how to prevent it. In my mind, it was literally a roll of the dice. Maybe you get it, maybe you don't. And let's be honest, I was young and enjoying the life of a university student, so what did I know? And information was not as available as it is now. The internet was new, and I could not afford to buy a computer. So I went about my life for the next 20 years without too much thought towards cancer. I am grateful that the story is different for my sons. Part of their education, unfortunately, was watching me go through cancer, but their education is also centered on awareness. We talked openly with them about what the diagnosis looked like and what was going to happen. But more importantly, I believe because I chose so many lifestyle changes and introduced them into our home, that my boys have had a real-world, real-time education. I'm hopeful that they will bring into their lives what they've learned, maybe not all of it, they're going to choose for themselves, but that they even have awareness is so much more than I and many of us had. I didn't know about the power of food. I was one of those people that believed what I was eating was healthy because the labels said so, because all of my peers were living the same way, because quality education around food and nutrition isn't emphasized. I wasn't into reading labels, and I had no idea then that the food industry was more concerned about selling products than supporting good eating habits. I wasn't a big drinker, a couple of drinks a week maybe. I didn't smoke. I didn't really exercise a whole lot. I just lived in a way that I suspect most people do. Get up, go to school, go to work, eat what I could afford, what I liked, sleep, and repeat. Life continued like this until I got married and had kids, and all seemed good. I went to work as a teacher, I became a runner, I ran numerous half marathons and marathons, I went to yoga for fitness. I figured that I was doing things right. But then in November 2014, as I was preparing to go on a 6-month leave from work, I started to feel unwell. I developed a pain in my left side that was nagging at first, but ended up being debilitating and with a trip to emergency. They figured I was constipated, gave me some pain meds, and sent me home. My bowel movements started to change. Now, this is where people get all squirmy talking about poop, but friends, we are talking about colons today, so poop is in the conversation. My bowel movements became darker, which was a sign of blood in my system, and thinner, which was a sign of a blockage. I couldn't walk 100 meters without being exhausted and needing a break and literally leaning against a wall to catch my breath. So this is where it starts to get a little bit messy. My family doctor at the time knew my family history, but would not consider talking about colon cancer. Instead, I was put on a drug for a bleeding ulcer. There was no bleeding ulcer, and the side effects of the drug landed me at a walk-in clinic, for which I am actually very grateful, because this is where the story takes a turn. The doctor on duty listened to my story and expressed deep concern for my symptoms. He sent me for an ultrasound, which I would later learn clearly showed spots on my liver that were definitively cancer. Despite this report, my family doctor still would not discuss colon cancer. He called my liver spots a red herring and insisted on staying focused on a gastric issue. Fortunately, he sent me for an upper GI scope, and that's where I met the surgeon who saved my life. I know that he knew as soon as I started to tell him about my lower body symptoms that this was serious. He added a colonoscopy to the procedure. I need to say at this point that the standard procedure for a family member with a history of colon cancer is to start getting colonoscopies and screening 10 years younger than the age of the family member who had cancer. With that logic, I would not have been screened until 53 years old. I was 42. The scope revealed a blockage that was growing actually around my colon from the outside and compressing it, hence the pain that took me to emergency. Fast forward through a series of x-rays and MRIs to January of 2015 when I went to my family doctor for a pre-op checkup. We knew that half the colon had to be removed because of the blockage, and I was getting ready for that procedure. What happened in that office on that day has changed my life forever. One is that I was alone. My husband wasn't with me, and we weren't told to have him at the meeting. I just thought it was a pre-op appointment. The second is that in that appointment is when my doctor told me that I had cancer. I left that office overwhelmed and in shock. I drove myself home. I don't even remember how I did that. And I waited for my husband to get home so I could tell him the news. That and having to tell our 14 and 15-year-old sons that I had cancer was the hardest conversation that I have ever had. Everything after that became a series of appointments. First came the colon surgery to remove the mass. That confirmed the diagnosis. Next came the visit to the oncologist. I had watched my dad go through stage 4 colon cancer, and I was with him when he died. That, as you can imagine, was very close to the surface at this point. We made it very clear to the oncologist that we did not want to hear statistics. We had decided before going into that appointment that day that every day was going to be a 100% chance of survival. Nothing was going to sway that. And my oncologist thankfully respected those wishes, and that's part of what has carried me through this whole process, is that 100% belief that I could do this, and in positivity and in getting through cancer. From there, I began chemotherapy, then visited the next surgeon to talk about my liver resection, where they removed 2/3 of my liver. Fortunately, the liver regenerates, and I now have a very weirdly shaped but fully functioning liver. I then had 6 weeks off to recover and was back into chemotherapy. On December 22nd, 2015, I rang the bell signifying I'd completed my treatments. But the story doesn't end there. Since that day, I have had 4 other cancer-related surgeries. My family and I have had to pick up the pieces of our life and figure out what it looks like from each of our own perspectives. My body has paid the toll, and I have come through on the other end, thankfully, but the impact on my mental health and my soul is very real as a result of everything that I've been through. Over the last 9 years, I've had a lot of time to learn and grow and reflect. I believe that there are 3 significant reasons outside of the medical intervention as to why I'm still here today. The first reason is that I listened to my body. Before cancer, I was a fairly healthy eater, marathon runner, pretty healthy person, but I knew when my body started to tell me that something was wrong. I knew I needed to get it checked, and I did. The second factor was being proactive and that intervention. I spoke up and started looking for answers as early as I could have managed given the quick onset of the symptoms. But once I heard them, I could not ignore the messages that my body was sending me, so I acted. Now, part of this action also required me to be my own advocate. My family doctor, as I said at the time, did not, despite what symptoms I was having, want to discuss the possibility of cancer. We insisted on action and testing. We took control of the situation because we knew we had to. I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to know your body, to listen to your instincts, and to advocate for yourself. The third factor is that I believed I could beat cancer. I had to. In that moment, I was 43 years old with an amazing husband, 2 beautiful sons, and a whole life ahead of me. I didn't have a choice. In believing I could do this, I chose to surround myself with positivity and with people who also believed that I could do this. They told me it wouldn't be easy, and it wasn't. They told me I'd have a tough road ahead of me, and it was. And some days it still is. But what I didn't know at the time was that this would be the beginning of my mindset work. The work that I had been doing on myself and that I now bring to my cancer coaching programs to support my clients. I am one of the fortunate ones. I know that. And truthfully, that is why I do the work I do, including this podcast. Supporting others who are living with cancer, I believe, is what I'm meant to do with this gift of my life. As it is Colorectal Cancer Awareness Month at the time of this recording, I would be remiss to not talk about education and awareness around this type of cancer. It's estimated that about 1 in 14 Canadian men will develop colorectal cancer in their lifetime, and 1 in 32 will die from it. It's estimated that about 1 in 18 Canadian women will develop colorectal cancer in their lifetime, and 1 in 37 will die from it. 66 Canadians receive a new diagnosis every day. It was the 4th most commonly diagnosed cancer in Canada in 2023. But what is really important to know is that this is a 90% curable cancer when it is diagnosed at an early stage. And that's why education around colon cancer is important, why lowering the screening age is important. Traditionally, screening for people who have a history of colon cancer in their family is done 10 years younger than the family member who had cancer. So in my case, my dad was 63 when he was diagnosed and died. I therefore should have started screening when I was 53. I'm 52 right now. I was diagnosed at 43, 20 years younger than my dad when he was diagnosed. The math doesn't work. What is known is that lifestyle factors have an impact on risk of developing colon cancer. The World Cancer Research Fund expert panel reviewed all the available evidence on diet, weight, lifestyle, and physical activity and the risk of colon cancer. They found that consuming foods such as fruits, vegetables, and whole grains containing dietary fiber is associated with a lower risk of colorectal cancer. Consuming dairy products is associated with a lower risk of colorectal cancer. Consuming red meat and processed meat increases the risk of colorectal cancer. Consuming alcohol drinks increases the risk of colorectal cancer. I took this information from the Colorectal Cancer Canada website and have attached the article for you in the show notes that contains more information on facts and myths around colorectal cancer that are valuable for you to know. And what is known is that you may be at a higher risk for developing colorectal cancer if you have signs or symptoms of it, have had colorectal cancer or polyps before, have a family history of colorectal cancer or in a parent, sibling, or a child, had an inflammatory bowel disease such as Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis, have an inherited cancer syndrome such as Lynch syndrome or familial endomyositis polyposis. And I want to add to that list stress. We live in a very stressful world, and stress often goes unmanaged. According to Dr. Mark J. Doolittle, PhD, in his article Stress and Cancer, he says, it is not difficult to understand how modern life increases the chances for arousal of the stress syndrome. Living conditions become more crowded, noisy, and polluted. The pace and intensity of life increases. Mass media reminds us constantly of the deaths, injuries, and threats all around us. Sources of information proliferate and then become increasingly confusing. When the world around us becomes increasingly stressful, The tendency is for the fight or flight response to be chronically activated. If the body is unable to regularly let down, it tends to not to swing back to its neutral non-stress point, and it becomes pulled more and more towards a chronic stress response. The result is a slowly rising level of internal pressure. This prolonged buildup of tension and excessive arousal can lead to a host of disorders. Many researchers have found that chronic stress can wear down our body's defenses, lower our immune response, and make us more vulnerable to all sicknesses, including cancer. If you want to know more about stress and cancer, I've linked this article in the show notes so you can give that a read. What I want to say is that knowledge is power. It is important to know what to watch for. Signs and symptoms of colorectal cancer may include unexplained changes in bowel habits, such as constipation or diarrhea, change in size, shape, consistency of stools, such as being narrower than usual, the urge to have bowel movements but nothing passes, rectal bleeding, blood in or on the stool ranging from bright red to dark black, persistent abdominal pain or discomfort, including bloating, fullness, cramps, and gas pain, unexplained weight loss, weakness and fatigue, which may be accompanied by iron deficiency anemia. I know this is a lot of information, but I believe in my heart that it is so important to share this information and my story of a girl who is living a normal life, who went from active and healthy to stage 4 colon cancer in a heartbeat. I don't live with maybes. I can't change what was, but I can share with you what can be if you start getting educated today, or to allow you to help the people that you love to get this education and knowledge. And as I mentioned, stress is also a major factor in disease, in cancer. Reducing stress can happen through a number of different techniques. And so to empower you with tools to reduce stress, I would also like to share with you my free Thrive Hers Mindfulness Guide. You can get it at katherinewhite.coach/mindfulness, and I'll link it also in the show notes. You are likely here because you already have cancer. I want you to know that you can do this and that you don't have to do this alone. So again, I'd like to invite you to join me in my Living with Cancer Go From Survivor to Thriver Masterclass on Thursday, April the 11th at 12 p.m. Eastern to learn more about reclaiming your life and transforming your health through my 5-step path to becoming a Thriver. You can find the link to join at katherinewhite.coach, or the link is also in the show notes. My hope for you is that you can shift from survivor mode, from fight or flight mode, into thriving, and I would love to be a part of that shift. If you are a new listener, I want to welcome you to the podcast. You've landed here for a reason that you may not be aware of yet, but I am confident that you will figure it out. If you find what you've learned here today to be helpful, please share it with other people you know that could benefit from this episode. Sharing helps me to support more people living with cancer and to help them move from survivor to thriver. And if you want to go ahead and give me a follow on Instagram, or if you're listening to this on YouTube, to subscribe to the podcast, I would love to have you as part of the community. You can find me at Catherine White Wellness on Instagram. You can give me a follow, take a screenshot of that follow and send it to me in a DM, and I will send you a free copy of my guide to managing cancer in everyday life. And again, if you know someone who might enjoy this podcast or find it helpful, please share it with them. And if you could leave a 5-star review, that will help me to reach other people so that they can also become cancer thrivers. Thank you so much for being here today. I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day, and may you live your life to your fullest, follow your heart, and thrive in all you do.